Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Maryann Petri. There is a non-denominational retreat weekend at the Resolution Center of Jacksonville, Florida. This will be a time of support and renewal for parents and grandparents on the journey of parental alienation, standing strong in resilience, paving the way for good health and a great future. This will take place April 22nd through the 24th at the Resolution Center at Jacksonville, Florida. I will have the details in the podcast notes. I have a brand new guest along with a return guest. I have Attorney Amy Cosentino here with James Schoch. They're going to discuss child custody jurisdiction. Attorney Amy Cosentino was born in Elk Grove, Illinois, and primarily raised in Tampa, Florida. Ms. Cosentino received a BA in dance performance from the University of South Florida in 1998. After 21 years of studying and performing in various areas of the arts, Ms. Cosentino started attending Nova Southeastern University Law in the summer of 2001. Ms. Cosentino was awarded a public service fellowship from Nova Law in 2002 for her pro bono work for the city of Hollywood. Ms. Cosentino worked for the Florida Attorney General's Office, the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office as a CLI, prosecuting in the Domestic Violence Division, and practices family law in the West Palm Beach area since 2005. Ms. Cosentino won leadership awards in 2009, 2010, 2011, and 2013 for her work in the Domestic Violence Committee of the Family Law section of the Florida Bar. She co-chaired this section from 2009 to 2014. Ms. Cosentino proudly received the 2012 Palm Beach Legal Aid Society's Child Advocacy Award for her pro bono work on abused children. Ms. Cosentino is a member of the Florida Bar in good standing. She is also a member of the Palm Beach County Bar Association, a member of the Family Bar section of the Florida Bar. Ms. Cosentino also participated in the Lawyers for Literacy program for the Palm Beach County Bar Association, is past president of the Palm Beach Nova Law Alumni Chapter, a mentor for Women of Tomorrow from 2009 to 2016, and is a published legal author for Lawyers in Florida, as she co-authored an article for the December 2007 and solely authored for the September 2013 Florida Bar Journal. Ms. Cosentino is also published and co-edited The Commentator, a source for Florida family law attorneys, and has spoken both at CLEs and other venues on domestic violence. Ms. Cosentino prides herself as a leader and speaker in domestic violence and court-appointed attorney ad litem. Ms. Cosentino served on the Legislative Committee in 2013 and 2014 and assisted and moderated the first all-day Florida Family Law Seminar in Domestic Violence in October of 2013. I welcome you, Attorney Cosentino and James Schoch, onto the Slam the Gavel show. And we have a lot to talk about. And primarily, this is all based on child custody jurisdiction and the paternity matters in infants. And what do we need to get the court to do in simultaneous proceedings? Because this is indeed a tale of two cities.
Good morning, and thank you so much, James and Maryann, for connecting us together today. I can't tell you what an honor it is, and it's an honor to be an attorney, and it's an honor to help people like James. So it's an honor I don't take lightly. It's a privilege, and it really makes me feel wonderfully that I'm here with you both today.
Well, I'm honored to have you both on because you do have a tale to tell.
Yes.
Especially when, a parent's child is absconded to many, many, many states far away.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that we see these types of cases, and James is not the only person who's been through something like that. Certainly not the first time that I've seen a parent take a child away from another parent and leave states. I've even had cases where they've left the country, which is a whole nother topic for Slam the Gavel on another day. But, the one thing that I think is really important for people to know is that we have an act in the United States. And specifically, it is the UCCJEA, and that stands for Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction and Enforcement Act. And really, every single one of the states, with the exception of Massachusetts, follows the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction and Enforcement Act. And to not hurt the feelings of any of the practitioners in Massachusetts, they still follow something similar. It's the older model called the UCCJA. So there is some similar language even in Massachusetts and amongst all of the United States to prevent a battle, if you will, and to prevent parents from taking a child from one jurisdiction and litigating in another where it's unfair to that parent. And so the purpose of this act is to avoid competition among the jurisdictions. It's to avoid conflicting child custody orders amongst the different states. It's to promote cooperation amongst the different courts. And it's also there to prevent, really a parental kidnapping, although that's a whole nother part of the act, but it's really there to prevent, you having to litigate two separate issues in two separate jurisdictions, and allowing a parent to what we call forum shop, meaning I like this court's, this state's got better rulings on these sorts of issues, or maybe it's more male friendly or more female friendly, those laws. So I'm going to take a child to this jurisdiction so that I can get a better result. Mm-hmm. So, that was really why this UCCJEA was enacted. And I can't imagine this predates my practice. So thank goodness, because I can't imagine what it must have been like the Wild West, prior to having something like this in place. So that's really the gist of what UCCJEA jurisdiction is. Now, interestingly enough, at least in the state of Florida, it still applies to paternity cases. And what's unique in Florida, perhaps to what some jurisdictions do, is that when a child is born out of wedlock in the state of Florida, the mother is the natural and legal parent of the child automatically. So if you're a father and you have a child with someone out of wedlock in the state of Florida, if you want time sharing, as we call it in Florida, or child custody rights, you need to file something. Okay, you need to file a paternity action. Now, there's different ways that your paternity can be established, and there's a presumption that you're the father if you're on the birth certificate. But you really need to put forth some action, if you will, in order to be able to have a legal relationship with the child. The mother holds all the cards. And, I think it's a longstanding rule in Florida, and it's interesting because really, biologically, a mother gives birth to a child, right? So, we always know at the hospital, if you're giving birth as a mother to the child, you know that that's the mother. Anybody could be the father, right? You don't really know. So in any event, fathers, even if they haven't had their rights previously established in the state of Florida, still fall under the UCCJEA. So they have standing to pursue child custody under the act. So what do we look at? Child is born, child is living with a parent. And in some situations, you could have a parent living in one state, certainly in the northern states, right? When you talk about Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, those states are really close together. So it would be just as easy and take probably the same amount of time to drive from Miami to, West Palm Beach as it might be to go from New Jersey to New York. So, it's interesting because the climate's a little bit different in those areas, but you still have this act to follow, right? So some people will work in New York City, but they live in Connecticut or they live in New Jersey. So what do you do with these situations? So the UCCJA is interesting to us practitioners because it's a very fact-intensive purview that we have to look at. And in situations where a child is under 6 months of age, it's a little bit different because the UCCJEA tells us we have to look at the location of the child and what is the home state of the child. And the UCCJEA says it's the state in which a child lived with a parent or a person acting as a parent for at least 6 consecutive months immediately before commencement of a child custody proceeding. So that's what the UCCJEA tells us. Well, so now what do you do when the child isn't 6 months of age?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the statute tells us if a child is younger than 6 months of age, the term means the state in which the child lived from birth with any of the persons forementioned, and that a period of temporary absence of any of the mentioned persons in part of that specific period. So, you know, you're looking backwards in essence to when you file, and every court case in the state of Florida, you have got to file a UCCJEA affidavit. And so in that affidavit, the parent is telling the court from this date to this date, this is where we lived with the child, or where I lived with the child, this is where the child resided. And so you look kind of backwards, if you will, to see what was going on.
You know, this was a complicated case.
It is complicated, you know, especially, you know, with the facts of the particular case at hand, because we had a child that was born in a hospital where nobody lived, in a state where nobody lived. We have mom staying with an aunt and uncle in New York and had been there prior to, you know, while she was pregnant, had been there prior to. Mom had not lived in Florida for like a decade. And then you have father who's a resident of Pennsylvania. So there were all kinds of different facts that we had to look at here. And, you know, as a practitioner, when we have these sorts of issues, we look at people's driver's licenses, we look at birth certificates, we look at, you know, where people are working, we look at where their legal residence is, where have they actually resided. Some interesting information for practitioners out there and litigants that are looking for help to prove what their points are is a lot can be told by social media. And it's really interesting because, you know, people don't get rid of their dogs, for example, if they're, you know, gonna be going somewhere that they, you know, that they know.
I'm gonna frame that one.
Yeah, so, you know, we learn things that way, and, you know, people don't realize that when you text message things and you're going to be a party in a lawsuit, that's evidence. And so that we get all these different facts, and then we kind of plug them in together, and we try to figure out what's best to do.
I just can't believe how complicated this was, because I was looking at some things you had sent. There was a mother's amended verified petition for determination of paternity of the establishment of child support. So that was when she had moved down to Florida. And then now she is going after James for child support. That's, I just think people are brutal. I mean, as an attorney, maybe you're thinking the same thing I am, but why do people do this to each other? Money.
Well, there, you know, so everybody's got their reasons for doing things. The tough part about James's situation is you have a child that was only 6 or 7 weeks old at the time. And, you know, not only, you know, he had a situation where, you know, he thought that mom was going away on vacation to visit some family and would be returning. And so he really missed out on a little over a year before this got resolved, maybe a little bit longer. James, you would know the timeline probably better than I would, but it was about a year.
Yeah, she had pretty much I think she planned the whole thing. Now that I look back on everything, and of course being part of that court in Florida, and the whole idea of, like, I think testing the waters of, oh, well, I want to, go down to Florida and stay with my mom for a little bit. I'm like, okay, let's go down. Great. I mean, I had previously went down there to meet her family, obviously. And then, then she was here a couple weekends in a row. So I was under the impression that, I mean, and she bought things for the farm, I mean, personalized things like salt and pepper shaker. I mean, I have a beautiful claw tub in one of the bathrooms. She got
Mm-hmm.
the shower curtains, just like little things that were very deceptive.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to, basically, Maryann, your point of, why do people, do this to one another? And I think it was just that she just wanted the child all to herself, due to her, due to the things that happened to her as a child.
Mm-hmm.
Around the age of 8 and whatnot. And, those are other factors that I think there's something, and I'm not a doctor, but I think there's something wrong with the mental and physical things that happened to her as a child, from her mother giving her up, and sexually abused. The man was charged. I mean, there was a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of factors why, people do what they do. I think she was seeking some sort of a love from the child to give her full time, and only her to fill the void, so to speak, within herself. But to
Mm-hmm.
interject on a couple of the things that Amy had mentioned, like the documents and the dog relocation, and I mean, that was wow, that was probably that was a good one. And actually her driver's license, and the forum shopping. So just a little bit on those points. The dog relocation that Amy had mentioned, and great work that you found that, Amy. She's telling me, Jennifer was telling me that, and their dogs loved me. I mean, the dogs were great. I mean, to a degree, but when they started biting the baby down in Florida, then it became, a CPS issue. But she relocated the dogs to Florida prior, and I forget the timeline dates on it without actually looking at the Facebook post with the pictures and the comments. But it basically went like, well, whatever, rules from the road or something like that. They're going to be with grandma now. And but wait a minute, like, you love the fenced in yard here on the farm, and
Mm-hmm.
and I've got 16 acres, and like, like the dogs were supposed to be here. And they
Mm-hmm.
were actually supposed to come early. However, the dogs got a free ride to 2,000 miles away to Lake Worth, Florida. So these were things that were premeditated, and like Amy said, these could be used against you in the court of law. And and I just don't understand how she didn't realize that would have come back on her. And then you look at New Jersey, as Amy had mentioned, the multi-state,
Mm-hmm.
multi-states involved. And you say, well, New Jersey, well, that's another one. Well, she resided in New Jersey for approximately like 10 years, but she worked in New York for, I think, about the same amount of time for a
Mm-hmm.
church. So, and yeah, that's where it gets complicated, and the UCCJA can kind of smooth it over a little bit, or help, obviously, in this case. But
And I think it's
yeah,
important
and her
to
driver.
mention that, there was no, that I recall, there was no allegation or petition for like a order of protection at that point in time for domestic violence in any state. So,
Right.
where I've seen past issues come up, whether legitimate allegations or not, is if a parent is going to be going somewhere for safety, for example, and there is an allegation of domestic abuse either on the parent or the child, you can get emergency jurisdiction and kind of safe harbor in another state. And the court would have to make some sort of urgent determination, like in the instance of, abuse allegations. But that was not ever a fact alleged here. So Florida would not have had emergency jurisdiction because there was no allegation or petition for protection against domestic violence here or in New York or anywhere against, my client at the time. So there was no emergency jurisdiction, and that's part of the UCCJA allows that. And what I've seen in the past is people use those sorts of allegations in order to get a foreign court to bless what they're doing. And you have to try and they got to get a lawyer now in this new state, and it's very expensive. It's very hard to litigate in more than one jurisdiction, and you have to go through the discovery process, sometimes taking depositions to figure out all these facts, right? Because it's not always a clear-cut choice. I think candidly, in this particular set of facts, had it had to have gone to court, which ironically it didn't in the end, but I think we would have prevailed. My opinion is that the facts were more on our side because the child we look at where did the child live, and the child, until she filed, had never lived in Florida. So, the little 7
Exactly.
weeks of his life, we're not here. And you have to, judges, we also have an argument is where is the most convenient forum for dad to litigate? And it's not convenient to have to litigate a case down in Florida when you've never lived here, and you're living in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of those issues going on in a lot of these cases where we're having to get these fact-intensive discovery to make a determination and to best present our case to the judge to make a decision. And the courts are required to talk. So if there is 2 simultaneous cases, and by the way, in a lot of these cases, I actually had one years ago that I litigated where they filed on the same day in 2 different states, same day, 2 different states. And so that I've never seen the timing that close. Mr. Schoch's case, the filings were a little bit further apart, not the same day, but I mean, this was like a matter of hours. And, although it's important to know that it's not going to, in my opinion, have a judge make a final say because somebody beat you to the courthouse steps. You're looking backwards at where the child lived anyway. So that's kind of an interesting issue that I've seen come up before in these sorts of cases.
Her whole skit, on this domestic violence issue, and I believe, when you touched on the multi-state, it's so, I don't know, kind of like redundant of itself, because if there was no injunctions filed in all the states, but then you welcome me down there even later, and it's like nothing's filed. They're all, bogus claims. And then you literally, we're there and we take the child to the zoo, we do things okay for him and us as like, and they go to the Liberty Science Center down at, the aquarium, and it's like, well, how scared of me are you? So it's like, and then you even top it off with coming back, and then you're currently living with a multi-count domestic violence felon. And it's like, unfortunately, the New York judge, which is where we're at now, like, doesn't, well, her responses were, well, New York is closer than Florida, isn't it? I mean, such audacity and attitude to, especially since what I went through, missing an entire year of my
Mm-hmm.
son's moments. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just heartbreaking and disgust that someone could even say something like this. And then to follow it up even further, well, the father can move closer to the mother, really, to a felon with a classified address at the time, um, and it's not even ownership for the mother. I mean, it makes no sense that, all this premeditated stuff is not actually being heard. And not to, get into the New York thing, but she literally tried to prove with those documents, just talking earlier, and I think you recall this, Amy, her Florida driver's license. Her Florida driver's license, which was, wait a minute, that's like some little bungalow that your mother has. It's not even your place. There's another woman living there, another alcohol abuser, drug addict. I mean, there was illegal immigrants on the front lawn drinking beer, drunk. I mean, and this is a place for an infant. That's good for an infant. To you chose to bring him there. I mean, but her document, with the Florida driver's license, she tried to utilize that, saying, well, I'm a resident of Florida. But yet you filed tax returns in New Jersey. You worked in New York for like about almost 10 years. You were married and your address was in Roselle Park, New Jersey, but you sold it a shared home. You had belongings that were at the Cube Smart in New Jersey, in Cranford, New Jersey, which that stuff was supposed to come here. So, there was all these pieces of evidence that, and that just she tried to utilize them down there. And then you get into the forum shopping. And I was paying her child support before I was even ordered to do so, because even that the mother had done this deed, and in my mind, and my feeling, in my heart and soul, it's criminal. It's criminal. And, she had done this. She's forum shopping in Florida. I believe, Amy, maybe you can recall, I think they denied her like 3 times for child support because she tried to get child support. Now, I was given credit for everything I did send her in a check form from Pennsylvania, because that's where my support order is currently at. But if you look at that with COVID and everything else, and then Amy, you may not know this, but because, it's been a while since we reconvened, but she tried to forum shop not only in, Florida and of course, Pennsylvania, but she wound up trying to get more money in New York. We went before a hearing with Anna Avalone, and the judge didn't buy it. And basically her story didn't add up, because had she had done that, she would have gotten, I believe it's either 17 or 21%. And that would have been like me, like, I don't know, buying her a new car every year. I mean, it was just ridiculous. I mean, so, and the current court in New York doesn't even want to like hear anything at all. Like, they don't want to hear any of the facts. And I don't know, maybe it'll come out in trial. I would assume so. However, everything that she's tried to spin on me is of itself. I mean, again, like, how can you be living with someone who, couldn't actually see his children for, I believe it was 2 or 2.5 or quarter years. I mean, it's like, but yet my son and her son is allowed to be there, living there full time. Like, wait a minute, like, and I don't even have a parking ticket on me. And we could go paper for paper. Like, her and I, if they want to turn it into that, we can go paper for paper. And it's not going to go far. I mean, I'm a 4-year journeyman, veteran for my country. I'm an honor graduate, U.S. Army Signal Center at the time out of like 300. Only one hire, distinguished honor graduate. I mean, I work for a major railroad in the Northeast coming on 21 years. In good standing. I have multiple, which they tried to attack, firearm licenses. I hold an FFL license through the ATF, Curio and Relic. I have a couple of CCWs, one as resident Pennsylvania. I have a non-resident in Florida. Actually, that was way before she even existed in my life. I hold a full letter of recommendation and accommodation from a colonel in the U.S. Army. Okay, his personal recommendation to do whatever I want to do at the time. And it's like they're treating me and trying to make me into this monster or this criminal where, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I pay my taxes,
Right.
it's just ridiculous. I don't know. And in our previous session that we had with Anna, I described it as, I feel like I'm being treated like I'm in a third world country. And maybe not all of those countries, because I think had she had done this in some of the countries out there, it probably would have been bad for her, especially in the Middle East. But, yeah, we're here in the United States, but it's just morally, even though it wasn't technically a kidnapping, she absconded him without my knowledge, et cetera, morally, it was so wrong to do that. And it goes back to parental alienation. And she took that to the extreme, and she's still taking it to the extremes by going even further and further, even though she's staying in New York, and just her actions that she has demonstrated. And the New York court just,
Well, going back to what you said about the parental alienation and the degradation of the parent, Attorney Amy, I see this request for production where apparently she wanted to put into the courts the video of parties engaging in an intimate act. And she apparently thought, I don't know what she thought.
conception.
What do,
I think this kind of goes, let me just preface this, how this topic came up, because I think generally this probably wouldn't even be relevant in a normal child custody or time sharing proceeding. What had happened in this particular case is, understand that child custody jurisdiction and jurisdiction over child support has really two separate factual tests. And so in the state of Florida, we have to look at whether or not there was an act of sexual intercourse within the state that led to the birth of this child. So in order to get a child support order from the state of Florida, you have to have intercourse in the state of Florida, unless there's some other minimum context to give personal jurisdiction over the father or whoever it is that you're trying to get to pay child support. And so, interestingly enough, in this case, there was a allegation that the parties had a trip here to Orlando, and that the child was conceived here in Florida on this trip. And what was interesting about it is, we had evidence not only by way of text messages to other family members, and
The doctor,
we had the ultrasound.
ultrasounds, yes.
And this is where science is so helpful, right? is those ultrasounds now are very accurate. And although I'm not an obstetrician and I'm not an expert on when babies are born, I have had two of my own children. And so I know how accurate these tests are. And so the ultrasounds were giving us factual information that would have put conception weeks before this alleged trip. So we're talking probably a matter of 14 days or so difference, so those were some interesting facts that were coming out. And then, poor James, in the middle of all of this, we're doing discovery in like February of 2020. And we all know what happens in March of 2020, coronavirus, right?
Right.
And so our world was we're making progress here. We're gathering information. We're gearing up to, go to court so the judges can hear the evidence and make a determination of who's going to have child custody jurisdiction. I think she ultimately ended up giving up on the child support jurisdiction, and it is, where it should be, which is Pennsylvania. But
Agreed.
in any event, what ended up happening was, we closed down our courthouses here in Palm Beach County. And I don't know the exact timing of who closed first, but they closed down in New York. I think New York stayed closed a little bit longer than we did. And then about a month after the courthouses closed here in Palm Beach County, we started doing Zoom hearings, which we're still doing now. Most of our proceedings in family division are now by Zoom, but we couldn't get any relief for anybody. It was almost like the only way that lawyers could help their clients was to come up with a resolution between the two of them, which isn't always possible. That's why we have a legal system, unfortunately, because if people could resolve all their problems, we wouldn't need courthouses and lawyers and judges to make a decision. So that was another issue that, it was like we had a time. We really did. We had a time in getting heard, and and none of that was our fault or James's fault or anyone's fault, really. It was just it really put us back a bit in getting him some relief. Now, as luck should have it, if I remember the facts correctly, James, she ended up voluntarily dismissing the case.
Yeah, she was losing. The whole conception thing backfired on her. The ultrasounds that you mentioned, the doctor in actually New Rochelle, New York, that she had picked, again, another geographical distance to keep the child further away from me. That's her pattern. She had picked that, the child, he was going to be born on 7/11. So it was comical, like the store 7/11. Okay. And, and it was a little laugh. Now, he was born on 7/7. So the science that you speak of or reference, and again, by no means, we're not doctors or experts, but, they do the blood works, you've been through it, you have your children and whatnot. And it was pretty much like spot on. I mean, come on, 7/7 to 7/11. And then she takes that and twists it and tries to say, oh no. And then the worst part about that is, and you may recall this, Amy, was the opposing counsel even tried to bring up the gestational period of the 40-week versus like I know, this was the like this, the normal healthy gestational period, but her opposing counsel down there, for a premature kid, like he was insinuating that, our son was born either premature or unhealthy in some way. So back to the science.
This was an interesting analysis too. And one of the things that I think really, really helped James, at least in my mind, kind of solidify that we were on the right track was that his sister had actually recalled the mother complaining of symptoms, like of nausea on that trip to Orlando.
Yes, that's correct.
So in my mind, this was really helpful because it kind of added on to the evidence that we had already had that she was already pregnant when they went on.
Morning sickness, right?
Having signs of morning sickness. And so, this tape was just like, I don't know. It wasn't something I ever saw or that any court was going to look at or anything like that. you know, it never went anywhere. I never even, you know,
Mhm.
I don't think the lawyers ever even looked at it, but,
Yeah, I mean, it's
you know, it was just
something
kind of a
else.
silly thing. Yeah.
You know, it just seems to put a parent through this, it's just the stress level of the parent.
Oh, diabolical.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely really hard for James. And, you know, I think what's really interesting about this particular set of facts is he actually came here to Florida to while he was going through it here,
Mhm.
and because he really
A
wanted
visitation, right? It was a visitation with the child. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean he had some time sharing here because it was like, I mean, think about it. He missed, you know, him eating his first solid
Mm,
food. He missed,
Yep.
you know, changing all those diapers, and he missed,
Yep.
you know, all
mhm,
those little milestones that baby have, you know, when they first start to
Right.
speak.
The bonding.
That and that he
Yeah,
really
and she just frankly didn't care. She frankly did not care, and she still continues to exhibit that behavior. And it's a shame because she's using the court system from, basically all around the Northeast,
mhm,
to try and get that job done. And whether the courts are that naive, I mean, obviously they were not in Florida, but surely it's a mockery of justice up here, and
mhm,
they just turn the cheek to, well, this is mom, and oh, she's crying in the courtroom, and we have to take a break. And well, I mean, is anyone going to do that for my tear? Where were they
mhm,
for my tears? And
mhm,
it's a shame. And not to make this into a gender thing, because I know this does happen to both, male and female, mom and dad. Um, but this case just should have been so cut and dry, especially when she came back. It should have just been automatically 50-50. But in my opinion, I just think that they know she cannot co-parent.
mhm,
And the easier thing to do is to target the other parent, try to
mhm,
paint them into this, unfit parent, monster, whatever, that, let's throw a bunch of, stuff up against the wall, see what sticks, throw mud up against the wall, see what sticks, and try and use whatever we can
mhm,
against that other parent, the loving, caring, fit parent. Because in my opinion, if you're a loving, fit, caring parent, you don't do this to another
mhm,
parent. Like, if I was that guy that wasn't there for the hospital, wasn't there on the birth certificate, wasn't there, along the way, and okay, we're going to live together, etc. We're doing, and we had even discussed about having 4 or 5 other children.
mhm,
And then she even takes it a step further, and another diabolical move. She names him with, okay, my last name, but she attached her last name on the end of it. And it was like, what are you doing? Like, okay, the middle name, it was of her uncle. Okay, fine, whatever. It was kind of neat because it was kind of country, you know, but to put an extra name, I mean, what's it going to do for the child in school?
mhm.
Like, he's going to have to write out that, like, I mean, it just wasn't thinking in the child's best interest. And unfortunately, she has not from day one.
Mm-mm.
And, still here we are today, almost 3 years later, they're trying to bleed me out. They're trying to get me to give up. They're trying to get me to screw up. They're trying to get something on me, and they have nothing. They have zero. They tried to get me in trouble with the law enforcement up here.
Mhm.
And the 2 sheriff's office in Pennsylvania said, no, we're not doing that. And they put in an affidavit. They,
Yeah.
her opposing counsel, literally supposedly spoke to those 2 sheriff's offices, and and they just said, well, first off, who are you? You're an attorney. Like, unless you're a judge or a DA, like, we can't do anything like that. The man has nothing on him. um, we can't, intervene with his legal firearms. He has rights, and we suggest that you follow the law. And they said that in writing. And it's like, and that unfortunately brought us to where we are today. And, the current judge got pissed off, doesn't know the law of Pennsylvania, thinks, I guess, that I'm a New York resident when I'm not, and tries to use it against me. Well, I'll just temporarily suspend the child's rights, even though they signed an order of custody almost 2 years ago saying that as long as the father's legal firearms are locked up in a safe, lock box, or a said box with a lock, that's fine. So the child, he's been with me for almost 2 years, family members, friends, all this, and no issues, certainly not with a firearm involved, my God. And, he has a great time here. I mean, it's just, I love him to death. And for them to do something like this is, to me, they're actually worse, like with their actions versus her actions. I understand why she's doing it with her actions because, more than likely the things that were done to her in the past, and I don't think she's got it all up there, but, the court, you expect to go to court as a parent, family court, and you expect a fair shake at it, a justice system, and you get the complete opposite, and it's like certainly not fair to the child, especially when there's a wellness attorney involved for the child being paid by the state. And he, in this case, doesn't care. Does not care.
Attorney Cosentino, do you see like a lot of this where you've got a fit-loving parent and maybe a parent who is just too honest get trampled on? Do you see this happening a lot?
Yes. I mean, there really is no perfection in the justice system. I will say that I think, probably 85% of the cases, and that's a good guess, that I see in my office have two parents who are recognizing the importance of the other parent in the child's life. So most people resolve their disputes with the child in mind, understanding that it's important for children to have both parents in the life of their child. And, the other 15 to 20%, they can't do that for whatever reason. Some of it's mental health related. Some of it is, some people have misperceptions of the other person or want to carry on a dialogue or are just, engaged in a selfless act of wanting to alienate the affections of the child away from the other parent. I see those cases a lot. I have a lot of cases where, a child is older and a parent is involved in the process of speaking in a way to the child to making the child feel badly about spending the time with the other parent, where, it's interesting because as children age, and I've seen this in my practice, they start to form their own opinions, right? But up until they're, 13 or 14 years old, what we tell our children, what we suggest to our children is happening. They don't always have the memories to be able to recall all of those things, right? So they rely upon what we tell them as storytellers to project their feelings and emotions. And so, I think there's more of a danger in that when the child is younger, based on my experience with family law cases, than when the child gets older. Now, a lot of times when the child gets older, children are smart. And so they learn how to manipulate parents. And, if children are seeing that their parents do not get along, they are smart enough to start to use that as a tool to get what they want. Whether it's, I want to stay home and play video games all day, so I know that if I go to dad's house, he's not going to let me do that. And so they have their own motivations. And so I'm seeing a lot of that right now in just the particular cases that I have where children are over involved in adult decisions and are a little bit older, or cases where a child wants what they want and it may not necessarily be what's in their best interest, and they're voicing concerns. And, you know, in cases where children are younger, they still need a voice. So a guardian ad litem or an attorney ad litem are sometimes the avenues that court systems will use in cases like that. My opinion is that when you're really dealing with facts and circumstances where a parent is alienating or keeping a child wrongfully away from another parent, that a better route to take is to get a social investigation. And what a social investigation is you're getting a licensed, you know, a mental health expert to do psychological evaluations on both parents. And what that expert will also do is meet with the kids. And if need be, the expert will do an evaluation, you know, on the children psychologically, so that it helps understand what is the family dynamic with the parties here. What are we looking at with this child? Where is the best parental fit? And they will be asked to do home studies. They'll go inside. So they are able to go a little bit further than what a Florida guardian ad litem would do, by way of having that mental health background and really being able to give an opinion of what's going on with the parties and their mental state and how that affects their parenting and how that affects this child. They talk to neighbors, they talk to collateral contacts, and then they look at the best interest factors that we have in the state of Florida, and they apply that information and they make a report. That report then goes to the parents and the attorneys, and then they make a recommendation of what the time sharing schedule should be. Should a parent have major decisions over one issue? Should be shared? You know, so they look at whatever. Is there really domestic violence concern? Is there a concern here with guns that's valid? Is there, you know, a concern that a parent is being inappropriate with a child? So they'll really get down to the nitty gritty, which is far better than allowing a stranger in a black robe to do it, because they only hear the case for a day, two, whatever, you know, they're only getting a little bit of information. And you're, you know, I think it's a big mistake when you have a high conflict case to not have an expert like that involved, because that expert is really boots on the ground, and, you know, they're neutral. And, you know, but it's very expensive. And so, you know, a lot of times, unfortunately, what is the most unfair thing that I'm seeing is that people who have, you know, moderate to lower incomes don't have the abilities to pay for these experts, which is what their high conflict case really needs. And so the justice system is not doing the justice that it should be doing, because, you know, us attorneys can only present certain facts. We can't present all facts because we have evidentiary objections like hearsay. And, you know, when you have a social investigator, you can kind of sidestep a lot of those objections because you're both agreed to this process, or the judge has ordered it and finds that it's in the best interest of the child to do that. So the hardest part is representing clients that don't have the ability to spend the money on that. You know, in Mr. Schoch's case, what would have been great would have been if had he not had to spend all this time and money on jurisdictional issues, you know, if there was an ability to do something like that there. I don't know. I can't speak, you know, to New York law, but that may be another avenue to take. But even the experts get it wrong. You know, it's not a perfect system. And, you know, even though judges aren't supposed to have ideals or put their own personal spin on cases, you know, I don't think that they can totally not do that.
If I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, Judge Maxine Cheeseman in Florida, she her bio, she worked with I believe therapists and whatnot. I think
I'm sure Judge Cheeseman has, I think she has
she was newly appointed, and I think
newly
she
appointed.
worked with
Yeah.
therapists, so that obviously made her ruling, made her,
Well,
more
I think in your case,
aware.
in Florida, she really didn't, we didn't really have any full evidentiary hearings on time sharing because the case
Right,
was ultimately dismissed. So,
right.
because really, the court we can't agree to litigate a case in Florida just because we agree, because the court has to have subject matter jurisdiction to hear that case. And subject matter jurisdiction can't be waived like personal jurisdiction can be waived. So a judge could have all of the best intentions and make you the best order, but if it did not have jurisdiction over the child to make that order, then
Right.
it's basically an order that's void, right? Or voidable.
Right.
So
Makes
you
sense.
don't, I think James would have gotten a fair shake here. And I would have been happy to do it for him. But the problem is that I didn't have jurisdiction here to do it. So.
Attorney Amy, how did you get this? I know it didn't go to court, but how did you get this to end? Because a lot of parents want an end to it fast because they can't take the stress.
Well, unfortunately, this is not an end for James. James is still litigating in New York. I think being aggressive with the discovery in this case, and then kind of a combination of just honestly, given facts, I think mom had not been so happy here in her move to Florida. I think that she, because of COVID or whatever reason, she had a job here that she lost. And so she chose to move back up to New York. So that was combined with, I think, the aggressiveness that we had here with the facts and witnesses that would have probably have brought it back to New York anyways. So, I say stay determined. Don't ever give up to people who are fighting that fight. And even if it's not just jurisdictional, but from a time sharing perspective altogether, that, I see a lot of parents just throw in the towel and say, you know what, I can't anymore. And I understand it. I mean, this is a stress to be involved in the judicial system is a really stressful situation for a lot of people. And I can't imagine, I feel stress in a lot of my cases helping my clients. I can't imagine living that stress, every day.
It's horrendous. It's a roller coaster of emotions, and it'll give you PTSD, and and to be, and especially in my case, to be accused and treated as a criminal, a common criminal. It's just it's the stress level. I mean, my support team, again, like you were saying with your clients, you feel it, it unfortunately it affects those, and that are around you, and it's hard. You have to cope, you have to stay focused, and you have to take a deep breath, and you have to maybe speak to a therapist and whatnot, and that costs money and time.
You have to spend the time and the money to do it, and you
Yep.
can't ever give up on your children. And
Right.
your children deserve to have both parents in their lives. And people out there that don't think that way, they need help in learning how to do that. And it's work, right? When it's just like any marriage or any business relationship, and that's really what you are as parents when you decide to have a child together. Whether you love each other or you hate each other, you are in the business for the rest of your life of this little person becoming an adult, and they have rights to have both of you in their lives, and you have an obligation as a parent to make sure that that life is happy with both parents. And so, just implore people out there that think that it's a good thing to be in the court system, or that it's a good thing to keep parents away from their kids. If you're other parent is not a safety concern. You know, and in some cases, I mean, I've seen guys and gals out there who have criminal records, you know, who have made big mistakes in their lives, rehabilitate and go to therapy, and even they have some sort of supervised contact or you know, contact in the community with the child. So, but to have an order where you just have no contact with your child
Oh, I
without
know.
ever even being convicted of a crime or charged
That's true.
or
And it's
anything,
not
I
even
mean,
in writing. And it,
just
you know,
to me,
yeah,
it's just, it blows me away. It really
yeah.
does.
And you're not the only attorney to tell me that. I've had, you know, other attorneys, you know, where they give you, you know, the consultate, you know, they give you the their
Sure,
advice, the consultation,
sure.
and to not have it in writing. I mean, oh, it's just temporarily there. You know, it's out of spite. It's out of personal bias and feeling. Maybe she doesn't like my beard. You know, I don't know. I mean, you know, they, you know, I mean, it's just wrong because you're really hurting the child. I mean, he was having such a great time,
Mm-hmm.
you know, with me,
Mm-hmm.
my family. I mean, being up here on the farm and then to just temporarily suspend because you didn't get what you wanted. You
Mm-hmm.
know, not the law, not, you know, you didn't get what you personally wanted. So the judge has made it a personal attack on my son and I. And the mother just sits back, you know, idle and just nods her head at it and okay, that's good. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, and but you know, again, not giving up. So, you know, I hope they're listening. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going away. And I've got boxes and papers as proof to show him. And, you know, going back to what you had said, Amy, about the technology and whatnot, you know, and the children as they, you know, get a little older, they try and get what they want by trying to manipulate mom or dad,
Yeah.
you know, well, you know, here's the video, son, you know, here's, you know, what I did with you. And, you know, because as long as they keep him away from me, you know, they'll never take away the memories and the videos and the time and everything that I did have with him. And again, not going anywhere, not giving up. You know, I love him to death. You know, and I'm sure, and I bet you my paycheck that he's asking or saying to them, you know, where's
Mm-hmm.
dad? Where's the farm? Where's this? Where's that? I guarantee it. And I just
And the
wonder what she's
older
trying to
and the
say.
older he gets, the more he'll be able to vocalize
Right.
that. And you know, the parents that have situations out there, especially with older children that are able to text or call or FaceTime. Now
Sure.
FaceTime is really wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
and those sort of apps. I even if the child is not communicating back to you,
Mhm.
can't stress the importance of every day, good morning, son,
Mm-hmm.
daughter, I love
Mm-hmm.
you, have a great day. Those
Right.
little things go a long way. And too many parents forget when they're the targeted parent to do those sorts of things, because the child's not going to forget that. And sticking to it rather than
Okay.
feeding into
Yeah.
any behaviors or characteristics that you're not listening, are super important.
Mm-hmm.
Making the child formulate their own opinions about you just by showing
Recording.
them love and attention as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think that's really very important for parents to know, just to just send them little notes if they're able
It is
to.
important because they feel rejected. They feel like the parent that is not with them is rejecting them. They don't really understand, nor should they know all the details of what's going on in the adult world with
Mm-hmm.
legal proceedings
And
and
it goes
um,
right down to, you know, the age-old parental alienation once
Mm-hmm.
again, you know, and for what reason? You know? I don't know. It's just wrong. It's just
Mm-hmm.
wrong like that, you know? So,
um,
Well,
well,
I don't want to keep everybody too long. Attorney Cosentino, is there anything you would like to add?
no, just I think we've hit the nail on the head of all of the legal issues that can come up with these multi-jurisdictional time sharing and paternity issues. And I just want to say a special thank you to James again
Mhm.
for inviting me and connecting me to you, Maryann. And it's always a pleasure to be able to help people. And James, I wish you the very best in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure, pleasure to see you again here and talk to you and have this podcast. And thank you, Maryann, for, everything that you've done so far for me along the way and being part of my support team here as well. And, of course, the other podcasts. And I look forward to having more with you. And
Definitely.
if you get a chance too, Amy, get Maryann's book.
I,
Yeah.
I, I have to say, I looked at it and it is on my next reads list.
Okay, great.
Well, thank God it's a short read, right? It's only 150 pages.
That helps in my day, yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel, the podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with James and Attorney Amy Cosentino here in the future, because we will be having more podcasts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.